We look at the Ice Age, that vast, frozen epic of geological time, and we see a rugged landscape of woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and hardy, fur-clad ancestors. We see survival, but we miss the entire point. This was not merely a story of endurance. It was a mythological crucible. It was the forging of a human consciousness that grappled with the absolute, bone-deep cold of the Pleistocene and attempted to impose a fragile, sacred meaning upon it. Imagine the reality. You stand at the edge of a glacier, a wall of ice a mile high, groaning and cracking under its own impossible weight. The wind is not just cold. It is a physical force, a predator that hunts for any exposed inch of skin, seeking to steal the precious warmth that separates life from a frozen death. The landscape is a brutalist canvas of white snow, grey rock, and the dark, skeletal shapes of dormant trees. This is not a winter wonderland. This is the end of the world, every single day. The cold here is not the absence of heat. It is a presence. It is a relentless, crushing entity that dictates every moment of existence, every thought, every desperate prayer. Yet, our ancestors lived here, in these most unforgiving, terrifying conditions. How? They were not merely surviving a harsh climate. They were enacting a profound, sacred drama. The life they lived, etched into the frozen earth with blood, sweat, and fire, was not a description of hardship. It was a transcription of the human spirit's will to endure. Let's begin with the most fundamental currency of life, energy. You wake up in your modern, heated home, and your first thought might be about coffee or checking your phone. An Ice Age human woke up with a single, gnawing imperative: calories. The sheer metabolic cost of staying warm, a world hovering near freezing, was astronomical. An adult male hunter-gatherer might require 400 to 1,000 calories a day, double the modern recommendation, just to break even. This wasn't a diet, it was a desperate, daily war against entropy. Every calorie was earned through immense effort and mortal risk. Your breakfast, if you were lucky, was a piece of dried, smoked mammoth meat, tough as leather, that you chewed for an hour. Lunch didn't exist. Dinner was a promise, not a guarantee. It depended entirely on the success of the hunt, an endeavor that could take days and cover dozens of miles across treacherous, frozen terrain. You didn't just feel hunger, you lived with it. It was a constant companion, a dull ache in the pit of your stomach that reminded you that starvation was never more than a few bad days away. A sprained ankle wasn't an inconvenience, it was a death sentence. A failed hunt didn't mean ordering a pizza. It meant watching your family grow weaker in the flickering firelight of your shelter. We, with our refrigerators full and our bodies soft, have forgotten the tyranny of the calorie. Our minds have no reference for a world where every single step is a calculation of energy spent versus energy gained. Then, there were the neighbors. We romanticized the megafauna of the Pleistocene, placing them in museums as static, magnificent skeletons. But to our ancestors, they were not exhibits. They were titans, living, breathing gods and monsters that walked the earth. Imagine a woolly mammoth, not as a fossil, but as a 13-foot-tall, 9-ton fortress of muscle and fur, its tusks like ivory scythes. Hunting one was not a sport, it was warfare. It required a level of cooperation, bravery, and strategic genius that is difficult for us to comprehend. A single mistake, a moment of hesitation, and you would be a red smear on the frozen ground. And the mammoths were just one piece of this terrifying menagerie. Consider the short face bear, Arctodus simus, standing nearly 12 feet tall on its hind legs. It was a predator of unimaginable power, faster than a modern grizzly, built to steal kills from other predators. It wasn't just an animal, it was a nightmare given flesh. Or the saber-toothed cat, Smilodon fatalis, a muscular ambush predator with 8-inch canines designed not for biting, but for a swift, catastrophic severing of the windpipe and arteries of its prey. These creatures did not fear you. You were a source of protein, the constant, background hum of your life would be a primal fear. The knowledge that at any moment, from any shadow, a predator of mythic proportions could emerge and end you. We have sanitized our world, removing the true predators. We have forgotten what it feels like to be prey. Beyond the immediate threats of hunger and predation was a danger of a different scale entirely, the planet itself. The Ice Age was not a static period of cold. It was an era of violent, geological instability. The world our ancestors knew was in a constant state of flux. Vast proglacial lakes, formed by melting ice sheets, could catastrophically empty in a matter of days, unleashing floods of biblical proportions that reshaped entire landscapes. The Missoula floods, for example, sent waves of water hundreds of feet high roaring across what is now Washington state, scouring the land down to bedrock. You could go to sleep in a river valley and wake up to the sound of a roaring tsunami of meltwater, erasing your entire world. Volcanic eruptions were more frequent and more violent, choked with the pressure of the overlying ice sheets. An eruption could blot out the sun for months, plunging the world into a volcanic winter, killing plants, starving the animals that fed on them, and, in turn, starving the humans who hunted those animals. Earthquakes, triggered by the shifting weight of the ice, would have been a constant threat, capable of collapsing the very caves that offered shelter. Our ancestors lived on a world that was actively trying to kill them. They were not masters of their environment. They were infinitesimal specks at the mercy of forces that could obliterate civilizations in an instant. We, in our hubris, build cities on fault lines and coastlines, believing our engineering can save us. They had no such illusions. They knew the earth was a capricious and terrifying power. And so, we must ask the most profound question: how did they survive? Faced with this relentless onslaught of cold, starvation, predators, and a collapsing world, how did they not simply give up? The answer lies not in their tools or their strength, but in their minds. They survived because they created meaning. They forged a spiritual resilience in the deepest, darkest places on earth. This is the purpose of the cave. The journey into the painted caves of Lascaux, or Chauvet, was not a casual stroll. It was a pilgrimage into the womb of the earth, a descent into a mythological realm. You would leave the blinding white of the ice world behind, crawling through narrow passages, plunging hundreds of feet into absolute blackness. The only light was the sputtering flame of a tallow lamp, casting monstrous, dancing shadows on the limestone walls. The silence was not empty. It was a heavy, sacred presence. Here, in the belly of the beast, where fear was a physical entity, they did their most important work. They painted. With charcoal, manganese, and ochre, they brought the great beasts of their world to life on the cave walls. These were not decorations. They were not a primitive Instagram documenting the day's hunt. This was high ritual. The act of painting the aurochs, the bison, the lion, was an act of summoning, of understanding, of gaining some small measure of spiritual power over the chaotic forces that dominated their lives. In the flickering firelight, the animals would seem to move, to breathe, to charge across the rock. This was not art as we know it. It was a technology of consciousness. It was a way to structure the universe, to give it a narrative, to find their place within the great, terrifying drama of life and death. Ultimately, this exploration of the Ice Age holds up a mirror to our own time. We believe we are the pinnacle of human achievement, shielded by our technology, our science, our global civilization. But this belief is a fragile illusion. Our complex systems have made us powerful, but also exquisitely vulnerable. We are utterly dependent on supply chains we don't understand, a power grid we take for granted, and a stable climate that is now unraveling. A single solar flare, a targeted cyber attack, a sufficiently disruptive pandemic, or the accelerating collapse of our climate could bring our world to a grinding halt. We would be plunged into a chaos for which we are psychologically and spiritually unprepared. We look at our Ice Age ancestors and we see a primitive, brutal existence. We see hardship, but we are blind to their true strength. They survive the end of the world, day after day, not because they were physically stronger than us, but because their spirits were tougher. They possessed a resilience forged in the crucible of absolute necessity. They did not have the luxury of existential angst. They had the immediacy of existential threat. And in the face of that threat, they did not just find food and shelter. They created myths, they sang songs, they painted the sacred in the dark, they transformed a universe of terrifying chaos into a cosmos of profound meaning. They were not just surviving an ice age, they were building a world. The paintings, the rituals, the stories whispered around a fire while the glaciers groaned outside, were not luxuries. They were essential technologies of survival. They were transcriptions of a spirit that refused to be extinguished by the cold.
In your modern clothes, your cotton, your polyester, you would last mere hours. Hypothermia would not be a gradual process, but a swift execution. Your body, so accustomed to a constant, regulated 98.6 degrees, would hemorrhage heat. First, the shivering, a futile, desperate attempt to generate warmth. Then, the shiver stops a deceptive peace. Your blood vessels constrict violently, prioritizing the core, sacrificing the extremities. Your hands, your feet, your nose, they turn the color of bruised plums. This is the creeping terror of frostbite, where water inside your cells turns to lethal, jagged ice crystals, rupturing the very structure of life. But let us grant you the fur of the woolly rhinoceros, the thick hide of the giant deer, sewn together with sinew, the essential technology of the age. Even clad in the finest prehistoric armor, you face the fundamental challenge: energy. The modern human requires perhaps 2,000 calories a day. The Ice Age human, constantly generating heat, constantly moving, constantly repairing the trauma of the cold, required upwards of 5,000 to 7,000 calories. A constant, relentless metabolic need. Every calorie must be hunted, killed, butchered, and eaten in a caloric profit margin. That means tracking the great beasts: the bison, the woolly mammoth, the cave bear, across a terrain that offers no roads, no landmarks but the distant, shifting constellations. Your modern physique, your muscle memory of the gym, the desk, the soft mattress is a liability. The Ice Age human was short, tense, powerfully muscled, a walking monument to efficiency and endurance. Their legs were built for unrelenting pursuit. Their lungs were hardened to the icy air. Your soft, pampered biology would betray you in the first hour of a meaningful trek. You would pull a muscle, sprain an ankle, and become, in that instant, a caloric offering to the very landscape you struggled on. This is the silence of the Pleistocene, a silence so profound it would become a crushing weight on the modern mind. Used to the constant hum of civilization, the only sounds are the wind, the distant bellow of a mastodon, and the frantic, amplified rhythm of your own heart, the sound of a life fighting to survive in a world that never promised it a second chance. But the cold is only the mask. Beneath the ice, the true dangers, the forgotten tragedies, and the mythological inhabitants of that frozen world. Chapter 2. The shadow of the apex predator. The cold, the hunger, these are the elemental forces, the stage set. But the characters upon that stage are drawn from a nightmare that modern science struggles to fully grasp. We have tamed our environment, pushed the predators to the margins. But in the Ice Age, you were the margin. You were merely an item on the deadliest menu in natural history. We speak of the saber-toothed cat, Smilodon fatalis. Its name is a poem and a warning. It was not a stealthy, graceful hunter like the modern lion. It was a heavy, muscular ambush predator, built for power, designed to bring down the largest game: bison, camels, young mammoths. Its 12-inch canines were not for sustained grappling, but for a single, devastating, deep stab to the throat or abdomen. Delivered with the muscularity of a small tank, you, with your relatively soft skin and lack of protective fur, would be a momentary annoyance, a crunch of bones. Survival against Smilodon wasn't a contest of speed. It was a matter of never being seen. Its shadow was a death sentence. But Smilodon was merely a specialist. The true monarch of terror, the most versatile engine of carnage, was the cave bear, Ursus spelaeus, and its even larger cousin, the giant short-faced bear, Arctodus simus. This creature was not the lumbering cartoon of your childhood. Arctodus simus weighed up to a ton and could move at 35 miles per hour. Its massive legs, longer than yours even when you are standing, were built for ground-covering speed. It was an opportunistic omnivore, but with a terrifying capacity for aggression. Its diet included whatever it pleased, from carcasses of mammoths to the unfortunate human who strayed too far from the safety of the fire. Imagine escaping its sight. Imagine running on the frozen ground, lungs screaming, knowing that every single beast in this world is built to outlast you, outrun you, and outkill you. Your only advantage is your mind, and the simple, devastating tool that created fire. Chapter 3. The Mythology of the Deep Caves. We look at the cave paintings of Lascaux and Chauvet, these vast, subterranean cathedrals of art in France, and we see magnificent depictions of bison, deer, and charging aurochs. We see art, but we miss the entire point. These are not merely galleries. They are mythological sanctuaries. They are the archives of a consciousness that wrestled with the terrifying chaos of the Pleistocene and attempted to impose a profound, spiritual order upon it. Imagine the journey. You enter the cave, leaving the brutal, white world behind. The air is warm, humid, and smells of mineral and earth. You walk hundreds of feet into the absolute silence, where the sun has never touched, where the only light is the flickering flame of a tallow lampa, dish of animal fat with a moss wick. The darkness here is not the absence of light. It is a presence. It is a primordial vacuum that swallows all sound, all confidence. Yet, they went to these deepest, most terrifying places to paint. Why? They were not decorating a living room. They were enacting a profound, sacred ritual. The paintings, rendered with charcoal and ochre mixed with animal fat, were not descriptions of reality. They were transcriptions of the sacred. The animals depicted, the mammoth, the rhinoceros, the feline, were not merely sources of food. They were totems, spiritual entities that held the power of the natural world. The act of painting was an act of summoning, an attempt to capture the animal's spirit, to ensure the continuation of the hunt, the perpetuity of the food. In the deepest recesses of the cave at Chauvet, hidden in a small alcove, is a depiction of a panel of lions, a pack converging on an unseen prey. The artistry is so masterful, so alive, it suggests the work of a single, deeply practiced mind. This was the work of a shaman, a ritual specialist, a mythological cartographer who mapped the unseen forces of life and death. The Ice Age human lived in a constant conversation with the unseen. Every shadow, every wind gust, every successful or failed hunt was a message from the spirits. Their survival was not just about sharp spears and fire. It was about cosmology. It was about ensuring they were aligned with the terrifying, beautiful will of the white world. This is where the fragile human psyche, bombarded by existential dread, found its strength. They created a shared narrative, a cohesive mythology that bound small, isolated tribes together. Their stories of creation, of the great hunt, of the spirits that lived in the water and the stone, were their most powerful survival mechanism. Your modern self, stripped of your social and technological network, would not just succumb to the cold, but to the isolation. The silence would break you. The sheer, relentless scale of the wilderness would crush your spirit. The Ice Age mind, however, was anchored by this deep, spiritual reality. Every member of the tribe was a link in the chain of survival. Every story was a lesson, every symbol a prayer. And this sacred space, the cave, was also the site of a profound, forgotten tragedy. We see only the majestic bison. We miss the subtle symbols, the dots, the lines, the quadrangles, a possible rudimentary language, a forgotten key to the most ancient human texts. What songs did they sing? What warnings did they leave us? The Ice Age was not a period of stunted development. It was the crucible of the human spirit. It was here, in the cold, deep dark, that we became truly human, the only creature that could stare into the face of a 10-foot-tall predator and not merely run, but draw its magnificent, terrifying image upon the wall. Chapter 4. The Tyranny of Water and Stone. The Ice Age did not merely cool the world. It entirely reorganized the elements. The most profound, unyielding tyranny of this age was wielded by water, locked away in the colossal ice sheets. The missing oceans dictated the very shape of the continents and the desperate existence of its inhabitants. Imagine your most basic, non-negotiable need, water. In the Ice Age, most of it was solid. To drink, you must melt. To melt, you must expend precious firewood or bone fuel, or rely on the fragile warmth of your own body against a piece of ice. Every sip is a metabolic loss, a costly investment. But beyond the daily struggle for hydration lay a far greater geological danger: ice dams and glacial lake outbursts. The giant ice sheets were not solid blocks. They were dynamic systems that interacted with the existing topography. As the ice pushed south, it would often block the natural flow of rivers, the Columbia River, the Missouri River, creating immense bodies of fresh water trapped behind a towering, unstable wall of ice. Glacial Lake Missoula was the most colossal and terrifying of these ephemeral bodies, holding 500 cubic miles of water. It was a ticking geological time bomb. When the pressure of the water inevitably became too great, the ice dam would fail, not slowly, but catastrophically. The resulting flood, known as the Missoula Floods, was unlike anything in the modern hydrological record. A wall of water moving at 65 miles per hour. The discharge was 10 times the flow of all the rivers in the world combined. It was an oceanic eruption that lasted for days, then weeks, and it happened dozens of times over a 2,000-year period. If you were one of the first human inhabitants of the Americas, following the game trails south, your camp, your fire, your life could be obliterated in moments by a geological event you could neither predict nor defend against. This is the definition of Ice Age fragility, the complete subjugation to forces of a planetary scale. And the stone itself was unforgiving. The constant freeze-thaw cycle of the periglacial environment, the area surrounding the ice, was a relentless architect of destruction. Permafrost, ground frozen year-round to depths of hundreds of feet, dictated where you could walk, where you could build, and where you could hide. Imagine attempting to bury a loved one, a fundamental human ritual. The ground is iron. To dig a grave is to wage a war with the planet. This perpetual, unyielding hardness instilled a different kind of respect, a reverence for the stability of things, and a terror of their sudden, violent instability. The Ice Age demands not just physical strength, but a terrifying, minute-by-minute calibration of risk. Is the ice on this river strong enough? Is the ground stable? Is that sound a rock slide or the beginning of a glacial tremor? You, accustomed to the engineered safety of your world, where the earth is passive and predictable, would possess no instinct for these perils. You would walk on thin ice. You would camp beneath an unstable rock face, and you would be erased. A silent statistic in the endless calculus of the Pleistocene. Chapter 5. The Tragedy of the Forgotten Hunter. The Ice Age story is often told through the glory of the kill, the spear, striking the mammoth, the tribe eating beneath a full moon. But the deeper, more human tragedy lies not in the great battles, but in the countless, unrecorded failures. The life of the ancient hunter was a tapestry woven with skill and courage, but the threads were spun with sheer, unavoidable luck. The true fragility of Ice Age humanity lay in the marginality of its existence. The margin for error was non-existent. Imagine the simple injury, a broken leg. In the modern era, a broken leg is a traumatic, but survivable, event. In the Pleistocene, it is an absolute death sentence. You cannot travel. You cannot hunt. You cannot gather fuel. You become an immediate liability to your tribe. Yet, evidence from sites across Eurasia, from the Cheddar Man in England to the Old Man of La Chapelle in France, shows that our ancestors possessed a remarkable capacity for care. Fractures were sometimes splinted. Teeth were sometimes pulled. The old and the sick were, sometimes, sustained by the younger hunters. This capacity for compassion, this willingness to share 5,000 calories a day with someone who could not contribute, is the true mythological act of the Ice Age. It is the moment humanity chose cooperation over cold logic, choosing to believe in the value of a single life over the immediate caloric demand of the group. But this profound care only extended so far. The tragedy is the inevitable, lonely death of the solitary hunter, the man who tracked the reindeer herd too far, whose spear missed, whose small fire was extinguished by a sudden snow squall. He lies now, somewhere in the frozen earth, a perfect specimen for a future archaeologist if only the scavengers didn't find him first. The hunt itself was a relentless dance with obliteration. Hunting the woolly mammoth was not a simple matter of throwing a spear. It was a planned, highly coordinated assault by dozens of men, often involving driving the colossal beast into a bog, a ravine, or a specially constructed pit trap. A single misstep, a broken branch, a delayed signal, and the massive, angry animal could turn on the hunters. A single stomp from a 5-ton foot, a single sweep of a 7-foot tusk, could erase an entire bloodline. Furthermore, the Ice Age hunter had to contend with the subtle, hidden poisons of the hunt, the pathogens. They consumed raw or partially cooked meat, drank water from uncertain sources, and were constantly exposed to the internal parasites of the massive animals they consumed. There was no medicine, no vaccination, no understanding of germ theory. A simple infection from a minor wound was a slow, agonizing slide into the dark. The sheer weight of constant trauma left its mark on the very bone. Archaeological finds reveal bodies riddled with evidence of intense physical labor. Osteoarthritis in the knees and spine from endless walking and carrying. Repetitive strain injury in the elbows and shoulders from spear throwing and butchering. They were old at 30. Their lives were short, brutal, and utterly exhausting. This is the hidden cost of the Ice Age, not just the cold, but the relentless attrition of the body and the mind. You, with your soft tissues, your reliance on instant gratification, your expectation of comfort would break, not from a heroic struggle, but from the simple, grinding impossibility of maintaining the daily, back-breaking labor required to keep 5,000 calories burning inside you. Chapter 6: Echoes of the Lost World. The great glaciers did not endure forever. The Ice Age was not a single, unchanging epoch, but a symphony of smaller pulsations, periods of advance and retreat. But roughly 12,000 years ago, the planet began to warm with a sudden, alarming rapidity. The ice began its final, colossal retreat. This warming, this transition out of the Pleistocene and into the Holocene, our current geological age, was not a gentle sigh of relief. It was a period of overwhelming environmental catastrophe for the inhabitants of the White World. As the ice sheets melted, trillions of tons of water flooded the land, rapidly raising sea levels. The vast, fertile Beringia land bridge vanished beneath the waves, cutting off the two continents and stranding populations. The coasts, the richest hunting grounds of the ancient world, were swallowed whole. This rise in water is the source of our deepest, most persistent myths. The global flood, from the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical story of Noah, from the indigenous narratives of the Americas to the Hindu Puranas. A global consensus speaks of a time when the waters rose to extinguish civilization. Was this memory an echo of the catastrophic meltwater pulse, the deluge that erased entire coastal cultures and transformed the shape of the world? The change was not just wet, it was biological. The mammoth steppe, that hyperproductive, open grassland, began to drown. The rich, low grasses that sustained the woolly mammoth, the woolly rhinoceros, and the giant deer were replaced by sterile bog and dense, impenetrable forest. This was the end of the megafauna, the greatest hunters that ever lived. Our Ice Age ancestors did not simply overhunt the great beasts. They were the agents of a final act in a planetary drama. As the landscape failed, as the critical plant life vanished, the remaining populations of the megafauna became stressed, fragile, and easy targets. They did not die off, they were erased. This great Pleistocene extinction is the final, profound tragedy. The world that made the mammoth was gone, and with it, the very way of life, the art, and the mythology of the people who hunted it. We know their life was centered on the herds. When the herds vanished, the very structure of society collapsed. The great art in the cave stops. The powerful, cohesive culture of the Paleolithic hunter fragments. This is the forgotten tragedy, the death of the mythological world. The surviving groups were forced into the more difficult, fragmented life of the forest, hunting smaller, faster game, adapting to a new, cluttered, and far less spectacular world. Their ancient, grand narrative became localized, smaller, and quieter. The Ice Age human, the legendary survivor, the painter of giants, was ultimately undone not by the cold, but by the warming. They could survive the extreme. They could not survive the profound, revolutionary change that shattered their world beyond recognition. This is the lesson of the White World. The greatest threat to any civilization is not stasis or hardship, but the radical, uncontrollable moment of transition. Chapter 7: The Stone Mirror. Conclusion. So, we return to the start. Why wouldn't you survive a day in the Ice Age? The easy answer is the cold, the hunger, the saber tooth. But the truer answer is that your mind is a child of the Holocene. You would fail because you are a creature of comfort, of excess, of certainty. The Ice Age required a primal, unyielding form of intelligence that we have largely engineered out of ourselves. You would be overwhelmed by the sheer, existential weight of consequence. There are no second chances. There is no social safety net. There is only the skill of your hands and the immediate, fierce loyalty of your small group. The Ice Age is a mirror. When we stare into the deep, dark caves, we are not just looking at paintings of extinct animals. We are looking at our genetic memory, the blueprint of the human spirit forged in the fire and the ice. We survived the Ice Age not because we were the strongest, but because we were the most adaptable and the most mythological. We created fire, we created tools, But most profoundly, we created meaning a transcendent narrative that made the suffering of the hunt and the terror of the night bearable. Think of the 35,000-year-old Venus of Hohlfels, a small, carved figurine of a woman, the earliest unquestionable depiction of a human form. It was not a practical tool. It was a work of art, a symbol, a tiny, fragile representation of fertility and life, found amidst the frozen debris of a brutal, cold landscape. This is the essence of our survival. The ability to manufacture hope when all material evidence points to annihilation. The forgotten tragedies of the Ice Age, the submerged cities, the lost languages, the extinction of the megafauna are not merely historical footnotes. They are a constant, timeless warning. We live now in the warmth, in the comfort of a fleeting interglacial period. We have built our world on the assumption of permanence, forgetting that the climate is not a gentle mother, but a colossal, indifferent engine of transformation. The ice is gone for now, but the potential for profound, cataclysmic change remains. We are all, ultimately, children of the Ice Age. The courage, the ingenuity, the sheer, obstinate will to survive that pulses in your chest, it was forged in the firelight, beneath the shadow of the mammoth. 20,000 years ago, you wouldn't survive a day in the Ice Age, but your ancestor, a creature of bone and sinew, covered in stitched hides, stood their ground, and because of their mythological will, you stand here today. Never forget the forgotten world. Never forget the impossible struggle. Never take the fragile warmth of this moment for granted. If the shadows of the past call to you, if the whispered histories of our forgotten world haunt your curiosity, then join us. Subscribe now and ring the bell to uncover more of the lost epochs, the vanished civilizations, and the profound mysteries hidden from time. Leave your mark in the comments and tell us, what forgotten history should we unearth next?